This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Carlisle, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Our Game 2 NBA Finals wrap-up live through Millions.co. Special shout-outs to Millions, as always, one of the premier platforms and hosting platforms. We definitely encourage our fans and our listeners and those that are a part of the Millions platforms as well to continue to keep it on lock as they continue to become one of the premier go-to sources going on. Alongside of me, my right-hand man, 50 grand, brother from another mother, my man, Mr. Warren Shaw, a.k.a. The Warren Shaw, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. As both of I witnessed a thunderous, resounding reply, or as Samuel Jackson says, retort.
Retort.
The Thunder retorts on the Indiana Pacers with a 123-107 victory to even up the series 1-1. And I just want to get your thoughts about what you witnessed, in this Game 2 statement by the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Yeah, I mean, I think you want to be able to respond, especially on your home floor after, I don't say choking away, but again, you lost a game that you pretty much had in hand. And they came out here, I think, off rip, while they built, a 19-point lead going into the half, 20 points after the third quarter, and then played pretty much even with them for the rest of the, really kind of the second half in general. This Thunder team knew that they could not go back to Indiana down 0-2. Like that's the main situation, right? And then you have to win, 4 out of the next 6. So we have an even series here now with the Thunder looking really more aggressive. I think from the very beginning. I think the role players specifically. Interesting that Dagonaut, stayed with the lineup change and bring Hartenstein off the bench, but then played double bigs for a good majority part of the second half. The second quarter, and then a little bit in the third quarter as well too, where that seemed to pay some dividends from them. Last thing I'll say before we let you jump back in is I love that Chet and Hartenstein, even also they were very aggressive. They have no respect for Miles Turner, defensively. So both those guys were they can take him off the bounce and have enough confidence in their play creation, doing that. And I wouldn't say that these are not, this isn't Nikola Jokic driving to the basket here, but they feel like, we are not worried about the Neesmiths or the Nemhards of the world swiping down on us, and Hartenstein and Holmgren driving to the basket early in the game was something that I didn't expect to see, as SGA kind of bided his time, but it ends up with 30 plus nonetheless. A brilliant performance for Oklahoma City Thunder from my viewpoint.
Yeah, this was an impressive victory by the Oklahoma City Thunder. And as again, this is a retort, right? I think we're caught up in the fandom of the NBA Finals as well as we should. We have two distinctly different teams. And I think what I was looking for, what I was hoping for, is to see both of these teams play to their strengths to the highest level. And right now, and again, I don't want this to sound like this is being disrespectful to the Indiana Pacers, because I think what we're also seeing now is another aspect to the Indiana Pacers that I even think could be, quote unquote, a force multiplier, as Mr. Bart Scott will say from ESPN, a force multiplier in their favor as this series continues to wane, is how hardened and perseverant this team can be. That if you are the Oklahoma City Thunder and you have them down, you need to drop the hammer on them hard. You cannot just sit here and allow this team to hang around, because they're going to force you to execute to the highest level because they believe the pressure is on you more so than on them. They basically always think that they're playing with house money. They're one of the few teams where they can say it, you can believe it, and you can see it in the way that they play. But I honestly feel like, Shaw, when you look at the number of quarters that have been played, right? So 8 quarters have been played. The Oklahoma City Thunder defense, essentially, for a good portion of these 8 quarters, have proven to be one of the more formidable defenses that we have seen in quite some time when they are playing at that level. When they stop playing at that level is when you see one of the more explosive offenses in the Indiana Pacers, with the pace and the frenetic play and the way that they make their clutch shots and things of that nature. We see them, kind of equalizing or nullifying or neutralizing that aspect, and then putting the onus back on the Oklahoma City Thunder. So I find it to be remarkable, because this is why we're having a series that's even 1-1, when we see both of these teams truly lean into what makes them as good as they are. And then you sprinkle in some of those moments of a good defensive play by the opposing team or a good offensive play by the opposing team. And this is why we get what we get with the NBA Finals. But I will tell you right now, Shaw, if the Oklahoma City Thunder leaned a lot more into knowing what they could potentially do to the Indiana Pacers defensively, this would essentially have been either a sweep or a gentleman's sweep, because the first two games that I've seen between OKC and Indiana, the Indiana Pacers have amassed 45 and 41 points in a half. And basically, if you double that up, they don't even break 100. But this is where, with the Indiana Pacers, they give themselves a chance if they're scoring more than 100 points per game, right? So I'm a little leery. How can you continue as an offensive team to be this slow in the first two halves and it not come back to bite you? And you have to start wondering, if you're the Oklahoma City Thunder, you lean on what you've been doing the first halves of both of these games, and you continue to do that. Can you replicate that in the second half, which seems to be your Achilles heel, is finishing the job, essentially?
I mean, that's an interesting standpoint and view, right? So I think, we all know the NBA is a game of runs and there's going to be ebbs and flows to it. I think, you can't just go by the duplicitous model, so to speak. If OKC was up 19 at the end of the second half, well, did you expect them to be up 38 by the end of the game? I think Indiana made some adjustments and figured out a way, in essence, like, all right, well, here's how we can maybe attack this defense. And yeah, maybe OKC let up a little bit in terms of the defensive intensity, but they played with them evenly. And I think the Pacers struggled to get their shots. I don't think Indiana had a lot of great looks. They looked lost to me many times throughout the game. Miles Turner, I think specifically, Obi Toppin kind of turned back into a pumpkin a little bit as well. And like those great performances, and Siakam didn't play well either. I think he was like 3 of 11 or something like that from the floor. So I think OKC, the ball pressure was still there. They made Indiana play a half-court style of offense, which they're not really great at. They were chucking the ball around. You see people all off balance. He's dribbling. He's stumbling and bumbling. Then Turner gets and he's stumbling and bumbling. So I think OKC did their job defensively. The Pacers hit a couple of shots here and there, but I don't think the defense let up. It didn't turn them over as many times as it did in the first half. And then if you conversely compare that to game one, where they had, 19 turnovers in the first half, 15 only total for the end in this game. But, the OKC Thunder win this game going away. Very, very strange game with a lot of nuances. OKC gets 20 points off the bench from Caruso and another 17, 18 from Wiggins as well, too. I think this Thunder team is very formidable, but Indiana, to your point, has got to figure out a way to stop getting off to slow starts and always having to come back in games. You've shown that you can play even with them and, even maybe slightly above them, I think, at times. So can you figure out a way to do that from the very, very jump? And hopefully we'll see that from Indiana going into game 3.
Well, so one of the things that I thought was really interesting, and I had said this, before, when the Indiana Pacers are playing at a frenetic pace, right? But they're only scoring so many points. To me, it doesn't bode well, because shot making and the shots that you have access to are going to be at a premium, right? In this particular game, because what we saw was last game, I think they turned the ball over 25 times, right? And the Pacers still won that game. I know everybody is caught up in that aspect of it, but if you look behind that part of it, it's what it was saying is the Oklahoma City Thunder did not capitalize on what the strength of their defense affords them to. You turn a team over 25 times and assume that you get 2 points for every shot. They essentially could have scored 50 points. And I'm not saying you're going to do that all the time.
Yeah, but we talked about that going into it. Like if it's a live ball turnover versus a dead ball turnover. So, right. I think Indiana has figured out, not necessarily figured out, but they didn't have a lot of live ball turnovers, especially in the second half of game one. And even in this game, you look at the fast break points, it's 9-4, 9-4 in favor of Indiana. So a lot of times that fast breaks are coming off those turnovers. So, the turnovers have been an issue in terms of the number per se, obviously limiting Indiana's open looks or looks just to kind of the bites at the apple, and understanding that every bite at the apple they get is dogged, because OKC's defense is like just kind of in their shirts. But ironically, OKC's ability to turn those turnovers into points has not been what we would have thought it would have been, despite, what was going in, what OKC was doing going into the series. It's really, really interesting because they were getting like almost 20 points a game off of turnovers. And that's no longer the case in the series in the first 2 games.
Right. And so on top of your point, I think what I'm saying is that there can be a 4-point swing if there is actually points being made. And I think if you're the Oklahoma City Thunder, while it's great that you're getting the Pacers to turn the ball over, getting them to turn the ball over, or you're forcing them to give you more possessions, but you got to capitalize on those possessions. And we've seen sloppy basketball and sloppy offensive execution on the Oklahoma City Thunder's part. Now, I'm not saying that the Oklahoma City Thunder are a bad offensive team. Far from that. They're a top 5 team offensively. Okay. But, and I think I was talking about this before we jumped on air because you found it, is what I was saying, conspiracy theorist mentality here. My thing with the Oklahoma City Thunder is that there are times, and I speak about this because I say from personal experience of watching our Boston Celtics, there are times where they feel like their offense is literally at times their best defense. Like they could just basically put a team away if everything is flowing for them offensively. And sometimes you have to take a step back and look at your shot selection and also look at what you're doing when you put your best foot forward, playing the kind of defense that you're playing and you're getting nothing from it, right? If the Indiana Pacers stop you from getting any shots up off of their turnovers, it's a win for them, regardless of whether or not you're up or down. It doesn't matter. What matters to them is no harm, no foul, reset and go back. And they'll continue to keep doing it. So as I'm saying, the Oklahoma City Thunder at times get so lost into their offensive, feels that they got to put the ball in the basket that they tend to forget that in the second half, if you just continue to keep applying the kind of pressure that you were applying to the Pacers, I understand that there are adjustments that have to be made. But again, you cannot afford to keep getting them to turn the ball over or getting those rebounds. And then on the other end of it, you're not putting the ball in the basket. You're not getting to the free throw line. You're not getting free points. You're just playing kind of stalemate kind of basketball. That's giving the opposing team new life or a new perspective that they still have a chance in it. And you can't do that if you're as good a team as the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard, to really keep your foot on the neck of a really good team. And I think that's what the Thunder are learning. And so while they're able to enforce the will, they're just getting out to better starts, right? But you wonder now, will that be the case off their home floor, right? You go to Indiana, can you do the same things that you did in game 1 and 2 in terms of these great starts, prolific starts, where, Indiana's bench will play better. The fans will obviously be into that game as well too. And you presume Halliburton will be more aggressive, I think, off rip, I think, right? There's a peculiar point in this game. And while we laud, I think both Carlisle and Dagonaut for what they do of really going into 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th guys of their bench. It's interesting to see how Carlisle remained just completely calm. And I don't say he didn't give the game away, but there was not really a sense of urgency from him, especially in that second quarter when, I think the second of the 9 runs was going on. He called a couple timeouts, but it wasn't, let me get my guy Holly back in here. It was, all right, well, we'll figure it out. And I don't know if they're resting on their laurels a little bit too, that, they can always figure it out and come back. I would have liked to see maybe, especially in that second quarter, I was like, let's not let this one slip away, right? And get Halliburton back in there a little earlier, maybe outside of his normal minutes rotation and rest, just to kind of stymie this, because you had a golden opportunity here to try to go up 2-0 and then go home, into Indiana. Again, I'm not questioning Carlisle per se. I'm just raising my brow a little bit, I think, to some of that decision making there, but have to kind of defer to what's gotten Indiana this far. But I'm just saying it was something that I was like, that's not a peculiar move, but an interesting move given the stakes that we're here in the NBA Finals. You're muted.
My apologies. Can I throw an interesting conspiracy theory out there for you?
Yep.
What if for a moment we were just saying that maybe Carlisle is saving Halliburton from Halliburton?
In what sense?
So one of the things that we obviously noticed is that Halliburton's level of aggressiveness was definitely not there in game 2, as in comparisons to at least, what we saw throughout the course of game 1, right? And obviously he flourished and shined, at the end of game 2. But a lot of that was predicated on him establishing that level of aggression early, even if he was struggling. You can just clearly tell it's either OKC cracked the Da Vinci Code and basically stymied him, and he just couldn't get out of his head or couldn't figure it out or whatever the case may be. Or Rick Carlisle recognized that. And if he's noticing that Halliburton just doesn't, I'm not saying have it, just doesn't have that level of aggressiveness that you see, sometimes it might actually be good to not just keep throwing him in there, throwing it in there. Because if at some point a foul's committed, a steal, turnover, whatever, and it's solely getting under him, I mean, now how many games are you going to go through? And they're professionals, I get it. But I'm just saying that with some star players, sometimes they can be their own worst enemy because they keep asking to go back into a situation rather than maybe somebody telling them, take a step back and see what you're seeing. Because even whether we're in it or not in it going into the game, there's going to have to be a level of you that has to be there. And I don't want you or me having to figure out whether you got it on a night in, night out basis. I'm just throwing that a little bit out there, possibly that maybe Carlisle recognizing that Halliburton is not being as aggressive as he initially was in game one was probably like, let me, kind of let him sort it out a little bit, but not keep trying to throw him out there if it's not doing any good for either him or doing good for the team itself.
I mean, yeah, I guess I don't think Halliburton was overly aggressive in game one either. I think, he ended up having a great fourth quarter and obviously that game winning shot. But I think this series, he's been somewhat stymied by the defense, right? And then even tonight, 5 turnovers is very uncharacteristic for him. So halftime, they asked, Jalen Williams, like, hey, how are you containing Halliburton? He's like, Lou Dort. That's how we're doing it. So I think the defense is kind of stymieing Halliburton the same way that we saw that against Anthony Edwards. At times Anthony Edwards, he couldn't be who he inherently naturally is because the defense is just suffocating and there's just guys everywhere. But I think there is some value to that. Maybe it's like, you know what, I'm still going to put you on our normal rotation, and then maybe you can put on your Superman cape and bring us back here in the second half.
Real quick, Sean. So I'm not saying this to be facetious, but what do you, when you say Halliburton was not aggressive, like what is your definition of aggressive for someone like a Tyrese Halliburton? Like I
think by even the broadcast standpoint, all right, is he looking for his shot, right? Okay. Because he is always looking to pass, and I think understanding that OKC is going to cut off passing lanes, they're going to be swiping. He loves the jump pass, he loves it, and so there's times where he got himself in trouble, and he's ended up throwing it almost into the into the backcourt, if you will, and now you're throwing your offense kind of out of sequence. So his inability, I think, at times to like, listen, hey, I'm going to go out here and try to get my shot and be more aggressive in terms of looking for it to take the shot, that can be, I think, to the detriment. And I'm not on the Stephen A. Smith, oh, well, he's not a superstar because he's not scoring 30 a game. And it's nothing like that. I think there's ways you can dominate, but you have to understand how you, not necessarily how you will be allowed to dominate, but what are the ways, in essence, you can pick your spots, in essence, to be impactful. So if you like to pass all the time and now those passing lanes are no longer open, well, you're going to be forced to shoot it, right? Or you're going to be forced to drive it more. And I think those are things where we saw some levels of, passiveness, I think, in general, where he wasn't like trying to do what the defense was probably allowing him to do. They were waiting on him to give it up, jump in the air, and then try to, get in those passing lanes. Again, for me to see him with 5 turnovers, very uncharacteristic. And I give a lot of credit to OKC's defense, and especially their half-court defense, for frustrating Halliburton in game 2.
Well, I love that you kind of leaned into your explanation of the level of aggressiveness, because now it allows me to kind of pivot, and let's talk about, the current NBA MVP and say Gilgeous-Alexander. And I wanted to get your thoughts about what he did tonight, and in comparison to, what everyone was lauding and applauding about his efforts in game 1.
Yeah, SGA in game 1, like he's like, he's basically like, I'm the MVP. Like he came out there like on a mission, he was gunning. And I feel like he was a little bit more let the game kind of come to me type of situation here. 6 points in the first quarter tonight, and not just like overly looking for his shot. And that's because he knew Chet needed to be able to participate. He knew Jalen Williams needed to kind of get off as well. Didn't know that Wiggins was going to have the game he did, but that ultimately, played some dividends as well. And knowing that the defense is going to have to, pay him a lot of attention. I think his floor game was a lot better than it was in game 1, despite the point output being slightly different, and it was slightly lower than game 1 here in game 2. But also his aggressiveness defensively SGA was timing things. He was getting steals. Indiana was unable to put him in the post. And something we said going into the series is like, hey, you got to make SGA work. Well, SGA was ready to work on the defensive side tonight, those strips and those steals, but even the ineffectiveness of getting Siakam on mismatches with him, and SGA wouldn't just let him get posted up. I think there's some scheming and some adjustments that Indiana needs to make, in essence, to try to make that better for them. But it was more or less a failed game plan that they were like, hey, we're not executing the way we want to. So then they just stopped doing it. But I think they need to continue to make SJ work off of mismatches, not off of guards, because he is still 6'5". He's got really great hands. But I think he played a really, really good game tonight, getting his guys involved both offensively and defensively. SJ definitely showed why he was MVP.
Yeah, look, 36 points. Wonderful. Like what he had 38 in game one, right? 11 for 21, Shaw, right? This is the SGA that I'm talking about, right? Game one, I think he had like 30. He took up like 30 shots. So like what you're saying, he was gunning, right? 1 for 4 for 3, but I don't care about that. 11 for 12 at the free throw line, big, right? More free throw attempts in this game than he did in game one. But the thing that just really resonates with me is that SGA is an MVP because of his ability to score the basketball with brutal efficiency. And he that's what I was looking for when we talk about aggressiveness, is he doesn't need 30 shots in order to bring the pain to the opposing team's defense, right? Like it's either going to be through the free throws, or it's going to be on the type of shots and the quality of the shots that he's taking. And then you couple that with saying, okay, I bring that effort defensively as well. You are now creating additional opportunities for either yourself or for your teammates to get more shots or get more looks. And he was all over that tonight. And that to me is what I was talking about. So when people, get on the feeds and, well, another brilliant 30-point something performance, but it's at the expense of an L, I sit there and I say, is that a quality performance from a person that when we've seen him play at the level that he plays, he doesn't need that many shots. He doesn't need to be, quote unquote, that aggressive when he's got that many other playmakers out there, or guys that can actually make shots when he creates those plays for them. That to me is what the difference is. And I think to me that resonates because we were just talking about Tyrese Halliburton. If Tyrese Halliburton is not playing in the fourth quarter, you mean to tell me he can't have an impact on the rest of the game and the rest of the team? Remember, game one, he had like something like 12. He had like 10 assists. Like, yes, he can still have an impact to your point, Shaw. He can be aggressive and he doesn't have to take shots to do it, but he has got to find ways to inject himself in that game in order for him to make his presence felt. The moment he dissipates or disappears from that, he's putting the onus on other guys to go out there and do that, which do you have that same kind of level of confidence if you're the Indiana Pacers in putting in the hands of those other guys when your main guy isn't really setting that standard or setting it off?
Yeah, I mean, but that's the MO of both these teams. There's a lot of confidence in all the guys, right? Basically 1 through 15. It's just that kind of permeates. But yes, the lead guys are unselfish in a way that is empowering. So I think both Halliburton and SGA exhibit that. SGA is obviously more prolific in terms of his scoring, and is just going to do that more often. But he's not, with the exception of game one, I don't think he's ever really been, overly looking for a shot. And I wouldn't even say greedy or selfish. I think he was just trying to set the tone and trying to lead in a way that maybe didn't need to be done, although it was leading to relative success until the last, 0.3 seconds of game one. But he switched things up around here in game two. Still got his numbers, got everybody involved, and I think just played a more balanced game. Got to the line, as you alluded to as well, and really just kind of had the Indiana Pacers, defense kind of in jail. Like there's nothing they could do. And when you're really watching him, like it's one thing to kind of watch him in the regular season, but now with the spotlight, you just see just how intelligent he is with his body movements, and I think more importantly, how deceptively strong he is. There was a lot of that, I think, when in the James Harden days, where it was just like, James Harden was kind of like just like rock solid. So maybe you could see that he kind of had that strength. But SGA is just wiry. And the way guys bounce off him, the way that he creates subtle contact, and maybe he gets a little elbow here and there, but he can hit shots while he's falling, hit shots with either hand. And it's something that can be ultimately demoralizing when you think you're just trying to play good defense. And he figures out a way to get that and an and one. Really impressive game, I think, from him tonight. But really, I think the aspect of how he allowed the game to kind of come to him in the first opening minutes here, allowed Chet to drive out, as alluded to, Jalen Williams to get a couple of shots off too. And that really got everybody involved throughout the course of the rest of the game.
You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warrenshaw discussing hot button topics of the NBA. Our Game 2 finals wrap up via through millions.co. So be sure to go to millions.co to not only check us out, but also check out the great content that's available on the website. But as always, you can always catch us at www.thebaselinenba.com. And you can also check us out on the YouTube channel, 19 Media Group family. Always be able to catch our episodes via through there. So a couple more points, Shaw, before we bid adieu and get ourselves ready for, Game 3. Unsung heroes. Look, Chet Holmgren, welcome to the NBA Finals. Wiggins, Hartenstein, welcome to the NBA Finals, right? Your Oklahoma City Thunder, you got to feel really, really good because a lot of guys that didn't show, solid performances, really came out and kind of even, I don't want to say even things up, but they definitely tilted the 50-50 balls, the rebounding, the matchups, the things that we thought maybe there was a slight edge of, when we watched how the Pacers played in Game 1 and got those same kind of efforts from role players, a lot of that tilted heavily to the favor of the Oklahoma City Thunder. And again, to me, what I find interesting about Oklahoma City is like, you're going to sit here and say, is it Jay Williams that's supposed to be the number 2 guy to SGA, right? You know what I'm saying? If he's Jordan, then who's his Pippen? And I'm sitting here saying to myself, I'm like, when you got a team that plays the way that they play defensively, I don't know if it matters that they're going to need an actual number 2 guy if as long as all of their players are collectively contributing in every aspect of the game that kind of nullifies what Carlisle would like to do offensively against that defense. And so I think we kind of saw that tonight, like with the efforts of, Daigneault now can actually say with confidence, you know what, I can actually play Hartenstein and Holmgren at the same time until Carlisle figures out a way to neutralize what I'm getting from the output of what these 2 guys are bringing to the table. And that bodes well, right? Like, because I think he was trying to play around with some matchups that he thought will work to his favor by putting in Wallace and everything like that. And I'm just sitting here saying, bro, you got 2 towers. Prove that the front court of the Indiana Pacers can stop what these guys have been giving you all season long.
Yeah, but I think Daigneault is just concerned about it defensively, and that's why he did what he did, and then even doubled down even after the Game 1 loss, started Wallace again. So I don't know if we're going to see that change. I think we will continue to see Wallace start, but then ultimately the 2 bigs get a lot of minutes, kind of like the Knicks series, right? Where, Tibbs realized, oh, maybe I should play Mitchell Robinson and Cat at the same time. What a novelty. So Daigneault has been doing that for the majority part of the season. And I think, with the success that they had in Game 2, we'll see that kind of more throughout, even though if it's not in the starting lineup. Interesting note for me, though, from the OKC side, somehow Lou Dort was on -3, in this game, despite what he did defensively. It just kind of shows you how plus minus can, it's beauty in the behind the beholder situation. While he wasn't the linebacker, and, free safety that he was in Game 1, all the tips and steals and basically hunting people down, and even all the deflections he had, I think it was more kind of a grounded defensive effort that we saw from him today, as I alluded to, really kind of frustrating Halliburton kind of throughout. And that's where it was. Like, so that's where I think OKC's defense is just, it's so beautiful, because there's times where it's just like, like these quick pick sixes, and it's just like, oh my God, and then like this avalanche, but they also have the ability to really like stand you up and stripe and really just play good defense and switch and, just get in the passing lanes or get in the driving lanes. They just have great principles on that side of the basketball. So it wasn't as flashy as sometimes that we're used to, but it was still effective. And so while Lou Dort had a -3 or -3 here on the floor, I think his impact was still mostly positive, but he didn't contribute offensively. And that's where it's just like a really strange game. I think when you look at the numbers, it's like, how did OKC win this by 20? But they did.
Yeah, look, great all-around performance again by the Oklahoma City Thunder. What are some takeaways if you are the Indiana Pacers? So I'm just curious from your perspective. Like, listen, this wasn't really a blowout. It just was a dominant performance, right? And it was a dominant you know, bounce back game that obviously, to your point, was necessary for the Oklahoma City Thunder. You do not want to go down 0-2 on the road going into Indiana, right? But I think if you're the Indiana Pacers, as much as I like the idea saying, oh, we walked away, with a 1-1, that's a great situation. It's more than you can ask for. I sometimes lean a little bit more, may call me the pessimist, but I sometimes lean more into the fact that, listen, if you're as good a team as you say you are, you should always be going in there saying this game should have been ours to win. I don't know where you've been able to find that with how badly they struggled, But again, if I'm, if I've got a person like the Warren Shaw in my corner, or helping me as my therapist, my mentalist, so to speak, what would I be telling my Indiana Pacers as I'm going into Game 3, given what I've seen, what our team has done in the first 2 games of this NBA Finals?
Yeah, I mean, if you're Carlisle, you're doubling down basically on the second halves. Like, this is how we need to play. Like, this is what gets us wins. Like,
forget what we did the first. Yeah, forget we did the first halves of both games. Don't remember.
Not forget, but you have to learn and expand upon the good in the second half and understand what went wrong in the first 2 halves of each game. I think they need to figure out a way to continue to get that bread and butter shot. If they're going to shoot this many threes, what do they shoot? 43s, I think, tonight. They have to get, the quality looks, right? And their quality looks are from the corners. So if OKC is going to start to like take that away from you, and I think this is where you can bait a aggressive but good defense, not necessarily into fouls, but maybe overplaying. So if you're able to swing and then getting more body movement, off of the corners, and then a guy cutting to the rim as somebody's maybe running to close out, then maybe you're putting that OKC defense maybe a little bit more on its heels, proverbially so. Indiana does a really good job of keeping somebody kind of stationed in the corner, but that guy's got to be ready to ball fake and or move the ball again if things are being closed out on. And I think Mathurin and Toppin, as I alluded to, they have to give you double digits. If Carlisle's going to play deep into his bench. And while I'm not looking for Ben Shepherd to be a hero, I'm looking for Thomas Bryant to be a hero. It was cute that you got that in Game 6 in the Eastern Conference Finals. You can't be looking for that on a regular basis. He's just got to go out there and not be a negative. I think it's Toppin and Mathurin who have to be able to consistently score double digits. And that doesn't mean they got to give you 18, 19, but even if it's 12 to 13, something in that range, because they're going to get plus minutes there, and they need to be able to spell some of the starters that are going to be just kind of worn out with all the defensive assignments that they're going to have on the other side of the basketball.
Yeah, and they need to reclaim the rebounding advantage. That was one of the keys for their ability to come back in that game. But I think as an effort to really kind of put the Oklahoma City Thunder on their heels, and also to kickstart your ability to take the pace up a notch, come out of the half-court offense, put OKC's defense on its heels in transition, you got to rebound the basketball. You just got to have a better effort rebounding the basketball. And I think, we were talking about this with regards to Pascal Siakam. We were talking about this with Nesmith. Again, I think if you're the Pacers, I'm not saying that these guys have got to come out and score like 30-something points. Pascal Siakam, I definitely think needs to just play better flat out all around. His presence just needs to be there. But I think sometimes we get lost into the idea that he's got to be the person to score 40 or 50 points or anything like that. It's not that. It's just that there has to be a level of aggressiveness. And if you're not going to score the basketball, then you have to make it up in these other key fields that are going to be necessary for the Indiana Pacers to be able to play the way that they want to play. Second chance opportunities, fast break, getting out on the breaks. You can get 2 or 3 more assists if somebody is running with you. But none of that means anything if guys are just going to disappear and they're absorbing 30-something plus minutes in the game. We look at the plus minuses, but I don't care about that. What I care about more so is any of that effort translating into other aspects of what you're not getting from what you do scoring the basketball. And to me, guys like those for the Pacers, they can be involved in this game. The Oklahoma City Thunder are going to give opportunities for some of the role players for the Indiana Pacers to shine. They're going to do that because that is the risk that they're willing to take if their intent is to take Tyrese Halliburton out the mix, is if to chase Miles Turner off the three-point line, right? To chase those guys off of the corner threes. So that means that these role players have to step up and have to win out on those other things that we talk about, those nominal little pesky statistics that seem to creep out of nowhere that we look back in hindsight and says, oh, this is what the difference was and probably swaying the outcome of this NBA Finals.
Yeah, I love the aspect of the rebounding, right? Indiana is not this power rebounding team in general, but they've got to figure out how to attack the boards, get deflections, second half points. It's like sometimes you're not getting a rebound, but you're tipping it out. So I think that's going to come from the guards, and that's Nembhard and Halliburton, Mathurin when he's in the game. Because Turner, I think it's like the Brook Lopez thing. Like, listen, he's just not a plus rebound guy. Siakam can get you there, 8, 9, so forth and so forth. He had 7 this evening, but they're just not burly, tough, get it in the gutter, in the mud type dudes. And like, that's not who they are, but those guards can be, and those guards are going to have to come in there and crashing to try to get some second chance points. And then I trust the decision making either to go back up with it or find maybe one of Siakam or Turner for a dump off and dunker spot, something like that. But rebounding for Indiana is going to be a very, very big key to this. Especially if they're going to shoot as many threes as they are. So take my scenario from a little while ago. If you're getting that corner three, then the backside, the weak side guy needs to be crashing the boards, aggressively but smartly to see if he can get a tip in, tip out to maybe a teammate, and get some second chance points for Indiana, because this OKC defense is just relentless.
Absolutely, man. All right, so let's talk about it. What we looking for for Game 3?
Game 3.
What are your predictions?
Yeah, Game 3. I think we're gonna see a more balanced game. I still, I think OKC is a better team in this series, so I'm not gonna pick against them. Although I still pick the series to go long. Indiana showed that they can figure things out in the second half. And going home, it should be a much more competitive game. But I'm still gonna pick OKC to pull this out. In a probably a 5 or 6 point game here in Indiana. I think they understand that, listen, they let one kind of get away from them, and that they need to kind of regain control and regain home court in this series. I would look for OKC to kind of get this done. But like I said, a close game that Indiana is more well balanced for and ready for from the jump.
OKC needs to take this game if they really want to put a seed of doubt in the Indiana Pacers' desire, to make this a long series, or to
I disagree. I don't think the Pacers have any seeds out. I don't think anything that will happen to them, nothing in this playoffs will deter their mantra. I think it's great for OKC to continue to boost their confidence per se, but you could beat Indiana by 50. They'll be like, so what? They're just going to come back.
No. I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen to Indiana. What I'm saying is if you, in your internalization about how you are in kind of imposing your will on teams, if you're saying that you want to put doubt on this team, put pressure on this team, hey, we don't want to squander having home court advantage or anything like that, you take this first game, right? I'm not even saying you got to take this first game and beat them solid. What I'm saying is if this game is a close game and it comes down to the wire, we have seen the Oklahoma City Thunder make quality shots on the road and basically snatch the hearts out of certain teams and fans in doing that. You know what I mean? Now, if it's a dominating performance, we're talking about something completely different then, right? Because now we're talking about they're just not in the class of what OKC, when they're playing at their highest level, is capable of being. But I think that this is going to be a close game. And I think that this is a great opportunity for the Oklahoma City Thunder to take one from the Indiana Pacers in a moment in a time where they feel that the confidence of them having that home court advantage, because they took one of those games from the Oklahoma City Thunder. If you get where I'm coming from.
I do. Yeah. So let's see what Indiana does. Let's see what OKC does. If there's any adjustments, I'm curious to see if Carlisle thinks like anything needs to tweak here. He's run with the same starting 5 the entirety time while he's gone deeper into the bench and seen guys like, oh, I didn't know that guy was on the scene. The starting 5 has not changed. So I don't know if we'll see anything like that, but hopefully the Pacers will be ready from the beginning of the game and not just in the second half. And OKC, as you alluded to, will be able to apply pressure throughout without resting on their proverbial laurels. But great series thus far. I know this wasn't the thriller that game one was, and maybe a lot more what people thought the series was going to ultimately look like. But we're still tied 1-1 going into game three. And I think, Indiana probably, well, they could be happier, but they're pretty happy, I think, with the outcome nonetheless.
Absolutely, man. Great game two. Once again, the Indiana Pacers lose to the Oklahoma City Thunder 123-107. Now game three swings to the field house. And listen, we're all for it, man. Once again, man, great opportunity to sit back, watch a great NBA game, but then chop it up with my brother from another mother. And once again, we'd like to thank you and yours for hopping on board with us and catching us and doing this game two NBA Finals wrap up. Thanks to our hosts, millions.co, for supplying us with the platform for us to speak our truths and our perspective of what we saw from game two. Once again, for the baseline, Carlisle, Warren Shaw. Again, check us out, www.thebaselinenba.com, and also catch us on the YouTube channel, 19 Media Group, for all of us and also the great content of family creators via the 19 Media Group family. Once again, you guys continue to enjoy the NBA Finals.